Hello, Free Money family. Sloane here with our annual year-end preview/review, where Ashby and I pick apart the millions of individual news events that made up this year, 2021, and distill them into just a few main themes that we're looking forward to see develop and play out in 2022. What themes exactly? Well, I'm glad you asked. For the first time ever, you'll find each of the things we talked about enumerated with timestamps in the show notes of this episode. Think of it as our gift to you. Now, you might be thinking, but I didn't get you anything. But of course you did. The time you spend with us on each episode of this podcast is a profound gift that's already brought new friends into both of our lives, lots of laughs, and a very fun way of staying connected. So in lieu of the regular longer intro where I tell you about all the forthcoming goodies, and don't worry, they're all still there. The questions from listeners, even the gardening tips, don't worry. I'd like to make sure that you hear my thanks. I'm so grateful to you for the time that you spend with us, and I'm really looking forward to spending more of it in the future. So that's it for me for this year and for this intro. I'll see you on the other side of the disclosure. Take it away, Sharkbait.
Ahoy, Free Money Podcast listeners! I'm Sharkbait Buckley, the Disclosure Pirate, and I'm here to set ye straight about what's going on with this here show. Sloane works for Invest Vegan LLC, a New York registered investment advisor. Ashby Monk works for Stanford University, Adapar, Future Proof, Long Game, and various startups. All opinions expressed by either Sloane or Ashby are entirely their own, and do not reflect the opinions of their crew or any company. Clients who Invest Vegan may maintain positions in securities and strategies discussed in this podcast. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Invest Vegan and its representatives are properly licensed or exempted, and a client agreement has been executed. Arr!
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money.
Dollar, dollar.
Welcome to the Free Money Podcast, where we give you the Brooklyn Bay Area consensus about institutional investing that you crave. I mean, the number one gardening and investing podcast out there.
It is. And it's the end of the year. And this is where we kind of reflect on, was it a good year? Was it a bad year? I mean, part of me thinks
it was a year.
It was a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's almost over. And so here we are. One quick thing I realized this year, Sloane, is we don't sound very good when we are being played at 2x speed. Because I was checking that out. I was like going through some old podcasts and be like, what were we talking about? And I was getting the 2x going. I was mortified at how I sound. And so part of me was like, can we come up with like a little strategy here for like pushing people to slow us down? 1.25, I think we still sound okay. 1.5, we start to sound pretty bad.
I mean, what was it like there was this moral panic. I remember, like, I wasn't alive for this, but in the 70s about like if you played certain rock albums backwards, they had, I think we should take
I think that was getting the lead out. Wasn't that Zeppelin?
I think that was Zeppelin. Yeah. Like, I mean, why don't we encourage people to listen to our podcast backwards?
Yes. The other idea I had was imagine if we speak really fast for some parts of the podcast, then it's like, it's too fast. Like if we speak really fast, they literally won't be able to listen. 2x speed is too fast and dramatically. They're not going to understand what we're saying. And so then eventually they're going to have to slow down. And then they get us at the appropriate speed.
I mean, I remember I went through a listening to podcasts at 2x speed phase briefly, and then I was just like really panicked about everything for a little bit, and I couldn't understand why. Like it was really not good for my anxiety.
No, you start sounding like the Chipmunks. Starts like
everyone sounds like the Chipmunks. Everyone's really excited about everything. I mean, it's kind of a weird long-term vibe. We should put a health warning.
I think we should. If you're listening at 2x, you're gonna have to like do a lot more meditation. Yeah, because technically, I think going back through some of them, I realized that we are enlightenment as a service. Do you remember that?
Yep. Holy shit, I forgot about that.
Yes, I think. Yes. Enlightenment as a service. If you go back and you look at some of our prior pods, you'll hear. Anyway, look, format for today. I was just gonna like spill the beans and say this is our end of the year closeout, and so we have no guest.
Yep.
And we're
just you and me. It's the preview / review of the coming year. I mean, and I guess, it is a sort of a pregnant time to take a pause and look, and say kind of like what's important to me, what was important in the last year, what's important looking forward.
Yeah.
It's a really good time for goal setting, and a really good time to just sort of ponder the void and experience ennui.
That's deep. For those that don't speak French, ennui means boredom. Is that what you mean by it?
Yeah, I mean, like basically boredom and despair. I think doesn't ennui have like a tinge of despair?
It could. Yeah, it could. It could be despair. Ennui could also be like, I'm just bored as shit. But I have to tell you, Sloane, so this is the first time we're going to do this segment, which is random shit I liked on Twitter in 2021. Because I was going back through my Twitter feed to be like, what happened this year? It's an interesting, that's where I turn to be like, what did I tweet? What did I like?
I mean, that's a function of Twitter. It's like the diary.
It almost is.
It's a microblog.
It's like a diary. I mean, I was going back through it. And I have to say, like, I found some things I liked that I thought I would share. These aren't things I tweeted. These are the things I hit the like button on. Okay. And so there's a few of these that I thought I would just read out, for people to just get a sense of the things that Dr. Ashby Monk thinks is worthy of a like.
The elevated, kind of social media habits of Dr. Ashby.
Yeah. So at Katie Hannigan, and I'm quoting her tweet now, people who intermittent fast love to chat about it. Maybe try intermittent shutting the fuck up.
This must be really close to home for you in Silicon Valley.
People talk about it all the time. It's hilarious. Next one is an anonymous Reddit tweet that apparently I liked enough to like it. Somebody said, and it was one of those tweets that's like a picture of a Reddit. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. One day, someone will think about you for the last time in eternity. You will be forgotten by the world and the universe. And underneath that tweet was a response, not if I eat the Mona Lisa.
I mean, you sent me this, and I was like, she's always looked delicious.
I don't just like that one. I love that one. Because it's like, actually, you really could be remembered forever if you ate the Mona Lisa. You'd have destroyed artwork, though. But
I mean, the most overrated artwork in the history of mankind. Let's be real here. I mean, no offense to Leo, he did lots of great stuff, but this postage stamp, come on.
I know it. And the thing about that one though is I think that is like the entire premise for that movie Jackass. Like, can we just do things that are so insane that people pay attention and remember us?
Yep. Every time I think about Jackass, I think about the fact that my mom was a classy lady, but she would just get inexcusably horny for Johnny Knoxville every time he came up. Just be like, oh yeah, that's
Do you know that I think they're doing another one? I feel like I saw a preview for that. I don't think
Steve-O is sober now and an evangelical Christian.
Whoa. He's running for office. Last one that I'm going to share with you. I have a few more here, but I don't want to do too much. I wanted to share with you something that Muffin Chips posted. I'm trying to give credit where credit's due, Sloan. Muffin Chips posted an obituary that was written by an artificial intelligent bot. And so the purpose of this obituary is to see how well the AI machines actually can write. So I'm just going to read you the obituary, and we'll just get your feedback at the end. Brenda Tent retired from living at the age of old, surrounded by family and natural causes. A librarian from birth, Brenda was an avid collector of dust. She had a sweetheart and married her high school. She loved having hobbies and helping her sons to be disadvantaged youths. She had no horses, but thought she did. The church gave her a choir because she sang like bird and looked like bird, and Brenda was a bird. She owed us so many poems. The funeral will be held in 1977 at heaven. In lieu of flowers, send Brenda more life.
I mean,
I don't think we need to be afraid of the AI robots.
I don't think so. It's funny. There's this, like, among AI researchers, there's kind of this big question about, like, when can we get AI to write actually funny jokes?
Yeah.
Because it's, that humor is kind of supposed to be something that you just can't fake. But, I mean,
Jesus.
Clearly, they're doing it.
In lieu of flowers, send Brenda more life is probably the greatest ending of an obituary that I've ever heard.
Yeah, exactly. Stop what you're doing and bring her back.
Yeah.
She owed us poems.
Oh, she owed us poems, everybody.
Yeah, I mean, this bird.
Yeah, and by the way, I didn't read that wrong. She sang like bird and looked like bird. And Brenda was a bird.
She was bird.
No, then they added the for the she was bird. Anyway.
I mean, you can put the rest up on the blog.
I'll put it up on the blog. I'll send you my list. Or you can just look through my likes at Sovereign Fund. You'll see some pretty weird shit in there.
I think, like, the likes are a real worthwhile place to spec for anyone. I love to see who people are following.
Me too. I do that. I look at it a lot. Oh, last one. Kennedy T. Cooper. Can't stop thinking about how the 7th largest pyramid on Earth is a Bass Pro Shop. Did I already say this on the podcast? God,
no. I mean, this is a
this is what's out there.
Common knowledge. This is like
I didn't know that. To me, I was like, that is. It looks so freaking big. Like there's a. It's
huge. It's huge. Have you ever been to a Bass Pro Shop?
Yeah, they are wild.
I remember visiting. Like, a friend of mine was clerking for somebody in Oklahoma, and we went to a Bass Pro Shop down there. And the thing that stands out most from the experience is that they had purses that have space for a handgun. That are actually pretty cute.
All you need to do to have your deterrence is carry the purse. You don't even need the gun in it. People see the purse, they'll be like, "Oh, there could be a gun in there."
That's a great point. And honestly, like, my purse, it needs more compartments.
It does.
Like, every time it's sort of like, it just is this amorphous thing, and I'm like excavating it. I need a place for a handgun-sized object.
I feel like there's a Seinfeld joke where he's like, women in their purses, like, just raking through, like, pouring it on the table, raking their hands through it.
I mean, it do be like that sometimes.
It do be like that.
We do be having disorganized purses.
So, news. We're going to do the news, and then we're going to do the trends. But first, there's some news that relate to the trends. I thought I'd hit you with 3 quick news items.
Trendy news.
I feel like we've been talking about this one for the entire year of 2021, and that is CalPERS is getting closer to appointing a new chief investment officer. They announced.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, they announced that they are holding their second round interviews for the CIO, and the candidate should start in March 2022. And in trying to get ahead of why it's been so hard to hire somebody into this job, the press people, I believe, were saying nobody wanted to move their family in the middle of COVID. And so 2022 is the moment where we should be seeing the new chief investment officer of the biggest pension plan in America starting their job.
And, I'm just going to kind of quash the speculation now. It's not me. I
was thinking it might be, but okay.
Yeah, it's just Invest Vegan is too important to me. And I also don't want to move my family to Sacramento in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, no, I hear you. We'll see we'll see. I mean, they say this person will be in the job by March. It's one of those jobs that, like, we probably know the person already.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, and it's one of those things too, where, like, they'll be in the job by March, but and hopefully, because the memes around this job are now so well established that it's like the hardest job in asset management.
Yeah.
The person coming in will be somebody who likes that and kind of wants the fight.
That's right. In fact, that was one of the tweets I put out, which is that the new chief investment officer has to pass the Kobayashi Maru test from Startup.
That's like that. Yeah, that's the impossible situation.
Exactly. Right? Look it up. The Kobayashi Maru. It demonstrates your ethics.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a pretty hard job. So we want people to be willing to sacrifice themselves for the good of the state. Maybe metaphorically, maybe literally. I don't know.
I think that California should do something kind of like Ender's Game, where they take like children who have made money trading cryptocurrency should be sent to a special camp in space, where they are subjected to a mess of psychological trials, and then at some point are, it turns out that they've been put in charge of CalPERS, like without their knowledge, all Ender's Game. Not to give that book away.
I think you just gave it away. That's amazing. So we're now plotting an Ender's Game style, child employment under the guise of gamification,
Yeah.
Like somebody's going to be playing their Robinhood account, and little do they know they're actually managing CalPERS money. Is that what you're saying to me?
That's what I'm saying.
This is
that's
actually like The Last Starfighter. Have you seen that movie?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God. He goes and plays the video game. He gets the high score, and then they're like, "We need you, son." This is my dream.
I mean, this is, I think, how you build a pipeline of candidates to do that job.
Yeah.
And like California, land of innovation, or so we have been told.
True.
I mean,
This could be under the guise of some alien project. Anyway, next bit of news. CalSTRS is paying its chief investment officer. CalSTRS is the other big plan in Sacramento. They're paying its chief investment officer a bonus this year of $1.1 million. Very nice living if you can get it. All you had to do was return $65 billion in profit this year. Small little sum.
Nothing, yeah.
And beat your benchmark by 2.22%, which is a above benchmark performance of $5.4 billion. And that bonus vis-a-vis that outperformance tallies up to 2 basis points.
Yep. Wow.
Good job.
Wow.
That's the size of our bonus pool.
Exactly. Like the minute you said that, I was like, oh gosh, what are the underlying hedge fund managers making on?
I know, right?
Like a subset of the strategic decision making, a subset of the risk taking and frameworking. I mean, it's really just sad.
The entire plan's bonus pool, to give them credit, is 0.25%. Okay? This is not 2 and 20. This is 0 and 0.25.
Wait, so it's a quarter of a basis point?
No, it's a quarter of a percentage point, which I think
a quarter
of the value add now, and the value
of the value add.
So the benchmark hit 25%. They did 27.2%. Okay, so they had to be above the benchmark, and I'm sure it's a rolling thing, so they don't just let you like walk away with big bucks in 1 year. So, but again, we don't do all the reading, when we're reporting.
Yep. I mean, it's we do a lot of reading. We can't read all.
Last bit of news before we move into the trends to watch out for in 2022: the projections and the projections. I don't know what the digestions. Yes, thank you, Sloane. The projections and the digesttions coming up. Digestion. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. New Zealand Super Fund has come out and said they are going to think more deeply about how ESG can fit into their risk budget, which is really neat for me because I've been doing this big, long project on portfolio resilience. We've done podcasts on resilience with Gene Rogers, who now runs all ESG at the Blackstone. And the New Zealand Super Fund, which I would argue is probably one of the, if not the most thoughtful long-term.
Guardians, absolutely.
The guardians of the New Zealand Super Fund. And so the chief investment officer, a guy named Gilmore, here's his quote. Right now, we're going through a process of trying to better integrate ESG considerations into our risk budgeting, and that's something that we'll continue to do over the next half a year or so. So my takeaway is in half a year, they will be implementing a resilient portfolio approach to portfolio construction, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be really interested to see how that works out because, like, when I think about it, like, it's relatively easy to make yes/no decisions with ESG factors,
Yes.
right? Or bad, not bad, bad, less bad. Those types of decisions, like shades of gray. But when you think about tying it to, like, a risk budget, traditionally in like a risk parity framework or something like that is like, relates the volatility of the underlying asset to the allocation that's held in it. And like, so I guess, my question is, are we then saying, okay, well, if something is a sustainable asset, then we're going to give it more space based on that, not the underlying volatility. Interesting in part because a lot of sustainable assets are sustainable energy assets, which have very low inherently underlying volatility, right? Like a solar farm or a wind farm or something like that. So I may actually read that whole one, when they come out with some details on it.
Or you could read our fabulous paper. It's called the Manifesto on Portfolio Resilience. And the reason I point out that we do have a manifesto on this topic is it really, like, you kind of raise a really interesting point, which is like, first of all, the volatility metric will tell you that something that drops 10% and then recovers 10% is riskier than something that drops 10% and recovers 3%.
Yep.
Okay. So the thing that you actually want is the thing that recovers fully, that has that resilience. And so in our work on this topic, we're trying to kind of integrate that concept of recovery. So it's like you absorb the shock, you recover from the shock, you learn from the shock, and all of that should be flowing through into your thinking of risk and how you're managing this portfolio. It doesn't yet for most all institutional investors don't think in these terms yet.
Yeah.
But when people ask you, why are you building an ESG-based, portfolio construction, your answer should be resilience. And, there's other answers you could give, but from an investor perspective, I think that is probably the kind of easiest one that like links risk management, links long-term investing, links ESG into a kind of coherent framework.
That makes it, yeah. I mean, like, that's certainly the way that I think about it. And I think too, like, resilience is important as distinct from statistical volatility because, like, look, a lot of these assets that are more fringy will be kind of illiquid, right? Yeah. And like, we're recording this on December 21st. The markets have been puked on.
I didn't look today. Is it bad today?
It's not like today. It's recovering, but like over the last maybe 5-10 trading days, we've seen, some stuff is down like 40%. A lot of SPACs are down 40%. So like is the question, what's the worst that you can get on a given day, or what's the experience of an investor over, multiple cycles or more or longer time horizons? I think resilience captures that.
Yeah.
Statistical vol doesn't.
I love that. And the other thing that New Zealand said, I should mention as well, which is really fascinating because so much of our podcast has been on impact. They've said that they're going to start tracking the outcomes that their investment decisions are contributing to. In addition, so most institutional investors, just for the listeners to understand, they think about how the world affects their portfolio because their mandate is to think about returns and delivering pension funds. Well, yep. And if you hear screaming in the background, this is crazy ass children again.
It's just the children I've tied up.
Yeah, dang it, I hear screaming back there. Everybody should be okay. But now New Zealand is going to start tracking what their investment decisions are doing to the world, which is a next level kind of calculation. And that's where like Sam Duncan of Net Purpose and all the work she's doing is so important. Yep. Because that's about tracking the outcomes. And then once you start measuring that, you might learn that like, hey, those outcomes are correlated with these performance outcomes. And that's when you really start having that next level unlock of long-term kind of oriented performance in an investor.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I'll say too is like from a, like a retail standpoint, the retail clients I have been like, it's actually a lot easier for me to deal with this volatility stuff, knowing that my companies are doing stuff in the world that I care about.
Yeah.
So like next level calculation, but also like a real enabler of better investor behavior.
Absolutely.
Which I guess that's a big trend. I guess that's an effortless and perfect transition to the big trend segment.
Oh my gosh. Holy cow. We don't have a little, sound bite, do we?
Oh,
Should I do one? Welcome to the 2022 Dancing with the Stars.
Welcome to 2022, where Ashby plays sound effects off his cell phone, and we find. I mean, like,
If you know, you know.
Yeah, will the disruption ever cease? What's your number one trend of the year?
Clean and green is the trend, and it comes out of 2021 commitments, many of which are kind of mind-boggling, and I thought would probably not happen. And I'm so interested to see that they have happened. Dare I say, pleased. I know that we are a very objective podcast. We
don't experience joy.
We try to describe the world. We don't necessarily try to engage and change the world. That's too normative and subjective. We are highly objective. But I will admit that seeing that Harvard has gone fossil-free, all sorts of massive fiduciary-bound investors have now made net zero pledges. It is, Norway coming out and saying they're going to push every portfolio company to define their net zero plan. So I think, if you thought that like 2021 with Glasgow and all this stuff was like a big step, this is just the beginning. We are about to see in 2022 and really beyond what these plans mean, right? Like you may say, I'm going net zero. But I promise you, most of the institutional investors don't yet know what that means. Many of the organizations have said we're going to go fossil free. They're still trying to put that puzzle in place to understand how can we do that effectively without, by the way, creating, using offsets or carbon credits. But like, if you go out there and you look into the world of institutional investment, I defy you to find organizations that have bought carbon credits. But I think that's going to start happening in the same way you see institutions dipping a toe into the blockchain, DeFi, crypto world. We are going to start to see some of these big long-term investors building a pipeline of offset type investments.
Well, yeah, and hopefully even getting into carbon as an asset class. I mean, like, there's apparently it was one of the hotter performing assets this year for people who, look at such things. And it's got a whole bunch of like kind of bifurcated regional markets that kind of make it an ideal active investment opportunity for, folks looking to put a lot of money to work. So, very, very interesting.
I wonder what the carbon credits, the voluntary market and all these offsets, wonder what they correlate with. And, are these kind of uncorrelated returns? Do we just see these as hedging instruments? And the other thing that I'm seeing more and more companies here in the Valley think about is, and we should have some people on to talk about this, are the different ways in which you can create offsets. Obviously, you can plant trees in my garden.
I know the perfect guy to talk about offsets.
You do? Perfect. Because we're going to plant. We got to get that person on to talk about how I can get offsets for my planting. And in particular, have people pay for the trees I put in my backyard. But beyond that.
And my compost pile. I mean,
I want to get offsets for the solar I put on my roof. Like, can't you?
Oh, yeah.
Can't you tell me, like, how much I've saved in terms of carbon and, like, hook me up? So I think I would like to get offsets for just how much of a superior human being I am. Me too.
For just like, modeling what it's like to be a decent person in the wild. That should be a karmic offset. I'll be a good person so someone can be a douche lord.
Yeah, I think maybe we could have as you begin to listen to this podcast, we have you link your energy consumption to the Free Money Podcast. Then after listening to the podcast for 10 to 12 episodes, we can derive a difference in the amount of carbon you're emitting because we so much free money, so much, and so ultimately, I think our podcast could be funded with offsets of some shape or form.
You're learning too much from the last blockchain episode about
shit. All right.
My number one trend of the year is, this is actually, it's an acquisition that heralds something that I hope will be a big change.
Okay.
So not many people really, made a bunch of noise about this, but Robinhood, everyone's favorite gamified trading app, bought something called Say Technologies recently.
Ooh.
What is Say Technologies? It is a shareholder engagement platform that allows individual investors to create questions for management and then upvote them and have, like a Say Technologies person ask the questions on the earnings calls. It also allows people to vote their shares. Now, why do I think that's important? Well, obviously, no one ever votes their shares. The voting, I mean, as we heard from Andy Bahar not too long ago, voting is too often controlled by these corporate interests like ISS and Glass Lewis, who vote with management a bazillion% of the time. If you're an institution, you can, use as you sow service instead. But what I'm hoping happens is that the GameStop event of the next year is a shareholder revolt led by individual investors.
That's amazing. And I think you're right that this is a key trend for 2022. I've seen two companies lately that are building new tech platforms to basically connect the retail world via their institutional investment overlords into these company voting systems. So I actually think this empowerment of retail, you don't need to go to Robinhood in order to do it. I think we're actually going to see the launch. I can think of two companies, and I can send them to you and put them in the show notes or whatever, that are launching in 2022 that are literally kind of doing what you're describing, which means there's three now. There's Robinhood and there's these two other startups that are like trying to help people, vote their conscience.
Yeah. I think it's something that we have, barely even scratched the surface of over the years, right? We had, Jennifer from Engine Number One come on and talk about the success that they had in getting a new slate of directors elected at Exxon, but if you think about the things that actually need to happen to affect the green energy transition you need you need management teams to get access to a fundamental shift in consciousness about how they view their business that only comes through direct engagement with a shareholder base that is a little bit more muscular.
That's right.
Big hopes for that in the coming
Me
years.
too. And I just went into my little system here. I'll just say the two companies. One is called Troop. I don't know if it has a web presence yet, but the other one that's up and live and doing some of this already is called Tumelo, TUMELO.com. And
mellow.
And it's so mellow, bro. I just realized as I said it out loud what they were going for. Too mellow, man.
We're trying to chill the shareholders out.
Dude, let's bring everybody down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're up here. I need you down.
Oh, this is like the opposite of 11 on the dial.
Yeah.
This is a solid 3.5. All right. My second major theme has to do with something near and dear to my heart here, which is long-termism. Not only did Stanford launch this new research initiative on long-term investing this year, huge deal, covered in the news.
Do we know anyone involved in that effort? Can we have them on this podcast to talk about it?
But aside from that ridiculous, huge news, Sloane, the long-term stock exchange, which basically we were a subsidiary podcast of that, what felt like for a little while because we had so many people. They had their two first listings. The exchange launched, and to me, this is a sign like long-termism is now becoming mainstream, and we're seeing these like tools and techniques for facilitating long-termism really take hold. We had Sequoia come out and launch their Sequoia Fund, which is an attempt to use like a novel hedge fund structure in order to facilitate longer term. And within the biggest investors on earth, I would say this theme is really taking hold. I don't know if I said this stat already, but I'll say it again on the pod. According to the International Forum of Sovereign Wealth Funds, ESG in 2020 was being utilized by sovereign wealth funds in decision making to the tune of about 25%. So a quarter of the sovereign funds were using it. Now we're in 2021, 1 year after that initial survey, the new number is 71%. That is a mega uptick in the amount of ESG that's being integrated. And so I think like, you know, if you ever were like, this is baloney, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Not if you, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast at this point, you never thought that. But, you know, if you listen to this podcast and you're going home for the holidays, you got serious ammo that this is legit. And my kind of take on 2022 is that we're going to start to translate all of these long-term things into cash flows and damage assessments and all the stuff that like investors need, you know, like the value of diversity on a board and what that means in terms of like diversity of thought and risk management. I think that's the next layer, is that translation layer of this sustainability, this ESG, this long-termism into things investors today can understand.
Yeah, I think that like for a long time, the problem with, you know, quote unquote sustainable investing writ large has been that it's very easy to describe in theory what happens. And it's in fact even easy to point to various premia that can be harvested and alphas that can be kind of traced out. But translating it into practice is nebulous because like what you're doing is in effect a synthesis of many different factors, right? Like I said earlier in this that, you know, it's easy to make go, no go decisions, but like, you know, to do that, you're going, you know, is there diversity on the board? And also, are they like doing something that's good for the world? And also, are they like hiring and retaining minority talent? You know, and then like 75 different other versions of and also. You know, and you need to really be able to map all that together. And like, I mean, at the end of the day, how do you prove the value of an open mind?
Yep, I'm with you.
You know, yeah, like that's like, I love that as a trend. I've got almost an opposite trend for the coming year, which is that you know, a group of very, very intelligent scientists have actually given Earth a black box akin to the kind that they put on airplanes to record crashes.
What?
Right. So the idea
so when
is
we fall into the sun, they could pull the black box out?
The idea is that this black box will trace our unfolding climate crisis as it evolves, recording data as a you know, that future civilizations can find and learn from.
That is such a great premise for a sci-fi novel,
right?
Oh,
right. Yeah,
I know we're in the middle of a podcast. I'm literally looking out a window, being like, "Oh wow, that's too rich." Of a story.
I mean, and you can already see, you know, the plot of that story unfold. I mean, that's kind of why I put it in here, is because, like, you know, it's a great ground for speculating about how such a message would be received.
So, do you want to know how this movie's going to go? They're going to find that one satellite that like was traveling out through space, playing the 1970s music and all that stuff. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
So that was a time capsule that we sent out. So, a million years from now, it's going to get to some other solar system. Some alien race will be like, oh, wow, look, we found this. And then they'll come here, they'll open up our times capsule, and then they'll have flashbacks and things like that.
Yeah. They're like, oh, we've never heard of jazz.
Exactly. Jazz.
Like, wow.
Yeah.
You know, but like, I think that these kinds of, you know, advocacy actions, I mean, it really, like, you know, I guess, you know, this is a little bit of like the, you know, the Bushwick chick from Central Casting kind of point, but, you know, it's a great use of art to kind of help us transcend the boundaries of our day to day, right? Kind of like the debt clock in Union
I was just
Square.
going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, where like you see, I mean, the debt clock is, you know, seems to be funded by the Koch Foundation or something. It's a little bit of like
it has an agenda.
You know, it has the morality inherent, or the, you know, the agenda underlying it is questionable. But
do you remember the doomsday clock related to nuclear fallout or something? I think they took that down because we don't have that threat anymore. But
oh no, they're still doing.
Oh, are they? Oh shit.
We're like a minute from midnight.
Jesus. I think we would get back a little bit.
Well, I mean, the nukes are still out there.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. They're out there, and now you know, other places are getting a lot more nukes, and
and we've got, you know, I mean, so, but you know, I think that it's instructive to sort of sit there and go, okay, so if I were to design a black box for whatever kind of enterprise I cared about, whether it's my company, my portfolio, my family, my life, my planet, what are the data points that I would put in there? Right? Because like at a planetary level, you're looking at temperature and atmospheric CO2 concentration, maybe wealth inequality, polarization, metrics like that. But like I just think it's kind of a cool place to take us at the end of the year to go, okay, so if I'm, recording, not for me, not for decision making, but for posterity.
Yes.
What would I want people to see?
Yep. The funeral will be held in 1977 at heaven in lieu of flowers. In lieu of flowers, send Earth more life.
Yep.
We're gonna have a robot write our final obit of the.
Oh man.
Anyway,
we need a free money bot out there. What's your next trend?
Last trend. This is my last one. I only had 3 for this. Hopefully.
Me too.
Okay.
Me too.
So it's all right, this is going to be a little inside baseball, but hopefully we can get everybody excited about this notion of investment decision-making shifting in 2022 formally from a process-based model of decision-making to a data-driven decision-making model. And let me explain what that frickin' means. But if you go back through the history of professional investing, we have used process to manage our risk, to manage our portfolios, because most of the data and information existed in human heads and in libraries and in networks.
Yep.
And so we would set up decision processes, so delegation frameworks, all these different things where you would have to reconvene and have, you need the approval of the CIO, we got to meet in the investment committee. And this process of decision making was seen as a way of managing risk. You can't have any amount, you can't be more than 10% of this fund. You can't have your asset allocation move beyond this. All of these you can think of as process-based decision-making because we never had access to the data that actually powered models. This is like, oh no, markets are efficient. And so we build, capital asset pricing model. Like these are all top-down models, call it shortcuts, for managing our portfolios through a process of decision making. Turns out markets aren't efficient. Hedge funds know that. But how did hedge funds learn that? They got the underlying data. They collected alternative data. So as the technologized investor becomes real, quote it, put it, just type that into the Amazon, see what comes up. Technologized.
Lots of people are talking about
it. A lot of
it.
people, at least 2 on this podcast. But the reality is you're now moving into this phase where you're getting the underlying data and you can actually start to design your portfolio from the bottom up. You don't need that top down thing. In fact, the top down is like an inefficient way of running your portfolio. If you think about what transformed human navigation, it was your GPS. You have one in your phone. Now we know where you are. And we can figure out where you're going. And you don't even need a shortcut anymore. Nobody's like, hey, I know a shortcut. People are like, what are you talking about? Just use your Waze, dude. Like, nobody's bragging about shortcuts anymore. In the old days, people were like, I know a shortcut. That was a big deal.
That's been really hard for, the world's dads.
It's been terrible. Yeah, we all had shortcuts we were proud as hell of. And guess what? Those shortcuts usually took like 20 minutes longer, right? It just happened that there was no traffic on it. Yep. Anyway, in the era of personal navigation where you have the GPS, the bottom-up data, you get to navigate in a more efficient way. Well, that's my big prediction for 2022 and beyond. We are moving into this era of data. All the investors, huge projects around data, from APG to ADIA to, all the Australians. Data is like a central focus of these organizations. They're building the data infrastructure. And on the back of that data, they will begin to plot new courses into the future so that data-driven decision-making actually begins to allow organizations to, for example, hold less cash. We would hold less cash because we weren't that confident in where we were and what my pacing was going to look like. Our liquidity, more concentrated investments in managers. Well, if I don't know when you're going to do a capital call, I'll just hold more of you. But now, if we actually have really good data on capital calls and the underlying assets, all that kind of stuff, we can go more concentrated. So this shift into the data-driven investment decision-making, which is a function of technology, I think can have profound impacts on investment outcomes and thus the world.
Yeah. Well, and I would add, like, just mechanistically, it's like, if you think about how active management has been delivered historically, it's been through pooled investment vehicles, right?
Right.
But we're now in a world where, in most cases, institutional investors have direct access to the underlying, whether through a separate account
That's right.
or an ETF, which is directly exchangeable for the underlying, right? So, a lot of those capacity constraints and so on and so forth are, based on supposed senses of illiquidity that come from the pool, not necessarily from, the actual liquidity of the underlying assets. So I think that, we love to see data. We love to see more data. And we love to see people doing bottom up work because, I like more often than not, I think that people are often using various asset managers and various vehicles as a stand-in for understanding what they know.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah, it
Because
was
like if you
go.
there's like, you go like, we got this guy from, Yale Ford,
Yeah.
or wherever, who's like very shiny and understands this stuff. So we don't have to really think about it.
Yeah. I think it was Buffett
like-
that said, like, diversification is a crutch for not understanding what you own. Or I'm screwing up the quote, but it's like that, right? And how do you understand what you own? You need data. Otherwise, you need shortcuts and heuristics and process. And so that process is on the verge of being upended from data. And that's that's like 10 years of working on this topic for me. Like, I'm finally seeing real organizations getting really granular.
I mean, that's, and that's actually, that flows so well into my last theme, which I think probably, the listeners out there, like, saw this theme, like, wrote this theme down at the beginning. They're like, all right, she's going to say this. I know she's going to say this. But, like, sustainable investing starts getting real.
Yeah.
I think is starting to get real. And, the data-driven decision-making that you point to is a great point of it. We've seen in the past year, people start to reckon with ESG's technology problem, by which I mean that many supposed ESG products are in fact lists of companies that don't emit very much carbon, which, winds up being what? Tech companies.
Exactly.
Right. Like, no slight to technology. We love the data. We love, our nice monitors and the ability to communicate all around the world and stuff. But, like, is that really sustainability? Like, I think one of the big indicators that I see in the past year that, like, it doesn't really get as much attention is ESG fixed income assets, right? For most of the past decade, ESG, has been kind of it's been mostly an equity story, right? But at the end of 2020, we had ESG fixed income bond assets in the U.S. at around 20 billion. Now they're up to 50 at the end of 2021, right? And that's really substantial, right? That means that, because I mean, in fixed income, you actually need supply of the asset in order to, generate another, like, you can't just bid up, ad infinitum the price of the stock. You actually need to issue more bonds. And that means that issuers are issuing, green bonds that are suitable for inclusion in fixed income ETF products, and the market is reacting to it. And, like, given that fixed income investors tend to be the people who actually do the research, as distinct from equity investors, who are a little bit more fly by night, that to me is a huge sign.
Yeah, well, fixed income is like, let's avoid the downside.
Yeah,
and equity's like, the upside's great. That's just it's
exactly.
a different mentality. I love this trend. I mean, it's interesting. It also, like, just iterating on it with you is like this whole, like, ratings of companies in this space it's all based on, like, relative performance. And, it's like, are we really getting clear on who's dirty and who's not? That's one thought. Obviously not. I think it's all baloney. The other thing, which I actually saw in the news today, I almost thought about putting it in here, was Canada Pension Plan. And if you recall in a prior pod, they just hired a chief sustainability officer. Canada Pension Plan has now said they're going to engage with the dirtiest companies in the world to try to get them on a track to being clean. And at first, my crabby reaction was, that's an excuse for you to hold dirty companies. That's the crabbiness. The positive reaction that I forced to emerge out of me after that is the reality is we do need asset owners like CPPIB, long-term view, 75-year, engaging with these companies and putting them on that path to being green. As much as we laughed at Philip Morris's ESG bond, it's like, actually, we do want to encourage them to like stop selling cigarettes to kids in Africa, right? Like,
yeah,
that's real. I do want to stop that. Stop that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that like I was listening to an energy transition podcast, with like a one of the modelers who builds the IPCC reports like earlier this week, and one of the things that comes through it is that the sum of all of those small actions that we might mock in isolation is actually quite a bit of progress, right? It doesn't really get as much attention that like the baseline estimates for climate change over the last 5 years have moved significantly down, right? From like 2.7 degrees of baked in warming to more like 2.1, based just on market stuff, right?
Yeah.
And like, the governments have been sitting on their hands. Like everyone's been twiddling their thumbs. It's just been the market. And like, yeah, that's a big deal.
I mean, literally this week, like, I know you're probably listening to this and this is all, like, everything's changed by the time this is going into your eardrums, but the BBB, that's not happening. So, is it already back on? Parts of it could be on. But like
Joe Manchin is like always just sitting there like,
I know.
I don't want it.
Everybody.
I don't want it. But maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Come check me out at my houseboat.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to admit, when I saw that houseboat, I was like, how much are those houseboats? I'd like a houseboat.
That's pretty cool. Yeah,
I would love a houseboat.
One of my like big while I'm cleaning the house affectations is to watch video tours of non-traditional houses like cruise ships and stuff.
Ooh, is it like a YouTube channel? Because I would get into that.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. It's just the algorithm is like
it
has
me
pegged for like a chick who would totally live in a houseboat in London. But yeah, in London in particular, there are a whole bunch of great. Kind of, and in Amsterdam, I guess too.
But are they the long, skinny ones that people live on that used to drive by us in Oxford? Okay, I know the one you're talking about.
Yep. Like sailboats and stuff. I mean, like I would totally live there. But I've lived in a warehouse for like 7 years.
Woo! Those are the trends.
Those are the trends. I mean, like it's time for hard things. That transition is not as good as your meme sound effects.
Hard things. This is what they say if you're trying to build a company. Thanks, Dr. Oz.
Thanks, Dr.
I think I am delusional.
Yeah.
I know you're running for office, Dr. Oz, but I appreciate you popping into the podcast here. My hard thing is actually something I've been struggling with for years, which is like, how do you manage the network? Like you're in this world, you're like out there. Making all, and I've been told I have a good network. I have a lot of asset owners in my network. How do you manage it? Like, it's not something you want to do through Salesforce. I'm not selling them anything, I'm not like trying to get them to take my stuff. I guess I'm selling the Free Money Podcast, but
we got to get like a sales guy to call people. Have you heard the insights that you could unlock from listening to the Free Money Podcast?
Free money. Yeah. So, but I keep experimenting. This year I started to like play around with a startup called Dex, DEX, which is, I guess, short for Rolodex, but he probably can't say Rolodex because it's copyright.
Yep.
But yeah, so that's my first attempt at like a personal network management. But I put it out there to the world. Like if anybody's using a tool that isn't trying to sell stuff, but literally just wants to like maintain and build relationships with key people, what are they using? What are you using, listeners? I want to know. I find that very hard.
I personally use posting memes on my Instagram to maintain relationships with all random people. I had something, I think it was called Contactually a while ago. It's another startup. And the premise was that it would go through all my things and tell me who I hadn't been in touch with for a while. And then it'd give me like a to-do list. Like today, reach out to Ashley.
Yeah.
I found it so stressful.
Yeah. You got to get the settings right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, you got to get, you have to go beyond like, here are all the things that you're not doing, to actually, have a sense of like who might want to talk to you about something that's on your mind. I mean, like, I think the gold gold for me would be knowing who's worried about the things that I'm worried about or wondering about the things that I'm wondering about.
Absolutely.
That would like to compare notes, you know?
What I want to have happen is like, let's say something shows up in my world, startup or something. Like I want to quickly be able to like look into a database and be like, who's the smartest at this thing? And not just have it like LinkedIn is close. I use LinkedIn a lot for these types of searches.
LinkedIn is unfortunately it's great.
Yeah, I use it a lot, but not everybody like keeps that shit up to date. And like the search tool on LinkedIn is pretty bad, I would say. You have to do like these like 10 results per page. You got to flip through pages, and and then you're right clicking all these people that you like want to maintain, and then they all see you that saw their profile, and like half the time they're like,
wow.
"Hey, what's up? I saw you looking at my profile." I was like, actually, I was looking for some random person who knew about, I don't know, quantitative trading, and you just popped up, and then I looked at your thing, and actually you weren't that person. So, anyway,
I get tons of inbound that's like, hey, would you like to invest in my vegan food startup? And I'm like, maybe, but later.
Yeah, let me get some AUM, and then maybe.
Baby. Yeah, exactly. Well, let's get to the point where I can do a private vehicle. But I guess that I would say has been the hard thing for me this year, has been like kind of moving from, like, when I say invest vegan and I talk about the morals of it. Like to me, it's like, investing vegan is about, avoiding harm to living things is, to me, almost a terminal statement of ethics.
Yeah,
right?
It's amazing.
Like it's, for a lot of people, it's like, oh, let's talk about food. Let's talk about protein. Let's talk about how bad animal agriculture is. And I guess it's good that people have that association and can like lock onto it. But I have trouble with that just being like, but it's so much more, so yeah, that's, that, and I guess getting off my ass and doing marketing in general, as has been my subject in like 8 out of 10 hard things segments,
Do you think like veganism is a concept that can kind of scale with the problems of Facebook and all this? Like, I saw that Facebook got dropped from an ESG index this week.
Yep.
And so talk about do no harm. People are now saying like there's a lot of harm that's going on in some of these tech platforms. Now it's harder to define, but I'm just curious, like, have you thought about like what a 21st, 22nd century concept for veganism could be, or am I like demonstrating how dumb I am on the topic by asking the question?
No, not at all. I mean, like, I think that, if you think about harm, right, avoiding harm from living things, what are the problems with Facebook? One of them is that it causes immense body image issues to people. Right.
Yeah.
In addition to being, a massive like platform for disinformation, undermining democracy, and all sorts of other stuff like that. I think that first and foremost, what a lot of tech platforms have wrong is that they rely on these surveillance capitalism type things in order to, so the user is the product in a way that's quite uncomfortable, right? That creates fundamental agency issues that I think, Facebook could solve. But it would come at tremendous cost to it on the bottom line, almost like Philip Morris pivoting away from cigarettes to broccoli.
Yeah.
Which they're just not going to do. I do think that there are, like tech company, like I own NVIDIA, for instance, which is a tech company, and like NVIDIA is intimately involved with all sorts of things, AI, autonomous driving, like anything that requires advanced compute power goes through NVIDIA, or their cloud now. There's nothing inherently wrong with technology from a vegan standpoint. It's the problem with business models that take the commodification of the person and like, without their, express knowledgeable consent,
So the DeFi, like the Web3 vibe, that is very vegan.
Yeah. I mean, it could be, yeah. I think that with Web3, you've got issues around like, oh well, how much stuff are you setting on fire in order to do it?
That's true. That's true. In terms of like the processing and the compute, you mean like?
Yeah, exactly. But like I do think, I mean, there are a couple of companies that use sustainable energy to mine crypto that are on my radar, and that I will probably buy in a big crypto downturn. Probably not now, but eventually, I when you hit the trough, that's the time to start buying it. But yeah, like I do think that there are applications for it, but like, or that there's a lot of relevance for it, but I kind of exclude the whole sector. It's actually one of my big gripes about the other vegan fund out there is that, their top 10 positions are all like Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon.
That's rad that you're differentiated from the other vegan fund, I think, because then by the way, if you're like, look, what we need is like a exposure to vegan, not what's the opposite of risk factors? I don't know, return generators.
Yeah, exactly.
Then maybe they give you both money, just get.
Yeah. I mean, I think that with like ethics first, investment approaches, we need like 1,000 flowers to bloom here.
Yeah.
Because it is highly, highly personal. So yeah, I think it's, I really hope that we get to see more of them. With that said, the perfect sound effect that we get every time.
We always nail it.
Yep. It's time for Dear Ashby. That's the segment of the show where we answer questions from the listeners for the one and only Dr. Ashby Monk.
People lurking behind me. Apparently, I was supposed to be done at 1. I lost track of time.
We'll be done soon.
Sorry.
All right. Did you change your mind about anything big this year?
Did I change my mind about anything big this year? I feel like I changed my. Oh, I feel like I'm constantly changing my. I'm in the doghouse. It's okay. It's carpeted and it has Wi-Fi. I spent a lot of time in there. Not as much lately as the kids have been getting older, but plenty of time in that doghouse. I've been like, in terms of like changing my mind in 2021, I think this is a hard one for me because like as a researcher, we're constantly having like our hypotheses like confirmed or rejected by data. And so like I was trying to think about this, like what did I really change my mind about that's like big? And it's like tons of stuff in terms of like investment related access and like what's the right approach to, I don't know, managing risk, I don't know. But like the one that I think is probably more personal is like this whole work from home thing, except for that moment you just witnessed, which was brutal. I think for the most part, working from home is fabulous. Like, I don't think I would have said that in 2020, especially like in the beginning of COVID with the kids home from school and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I think maybe it's working from home. I actually now really love it. And the fact that I don't have to be on planes to Australia all the time and like, that's good for the world and the environment, but it's also good for the family and it's good for me. And I feel very productive not having to sit in traffic. So that's the big one.
For me, I feel similarly. Like obviously one evolves views all the time, but for me, like it's productivity and efficiency is something I've changed my mind on in a big way. Because like I'm part of this co-op grocery store. Yeah. Where everybody like works 2.5 hours to run the thing, and every time you do that 2.5 hour shift, you go, holy shit! It is a miracle that this place is still around. Because, something happens and no one knows how to do the thing, or like, they're totally out of avocados for weeks, or they're totally out of bread, or something like that. And you would think that would be a really, really bad thing and make it, not functional as a choice. But in fact, like, that scarcity breeds, I think a much better appreciation of what's there and candidly, just a much better experience. Maybe this is, the way that a tanky who's totally bought into something and unable to update their views talks. But,
I've actually heard a few CEOs in this era where there's like enough cash like flushing around that you could really do anything, that like imposing scarcity on teams is a really important way of like driving innovation and like getting to outcomes that you might not have otherwise gotten to, if everything is just sitting there. And it's like, whatever you want, like, are you really going to innovate? And there's a big argument that like, this is actually what the patent like landscape does. You have to innovate around patents, which means that coming to market requires you to take a novel approach. Sometimes you have to pay the license if it's like a standard patent or, standard setting patent, something like that. But this concept of innovation around a patent is a very powerful one. because you have a constraint,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, is there another way we can do this? And so that's the scarcity idea, I think, too. Like you walk into your local co-op, and it's like, well, I really wanted pasta tonight, but they didn't have like the tomatoes I want, so I guess I'll try to figure it out with like cherry tomatoes and some peppers. And lo and behold,
Yeah, exactly.
your cherry tomato pepper sauce is like the greatest thing on earth.
Exactly. Where you try some weird squash.
Yeah. Oh, I love spaghetti
right.
squash. Have you had that?
Spaghetti squash? No, but my partner hates it and thinks it's a conspiracy. So
My mom makes it all the time. It's amazing. For another time.
I'll tell Claire that you're a big fan. We've got some sitting in the fruit tray. What's your favorite desk toy?
If I'm sitting at my desk, I'm not usually like fidgeting with too much. I have some pens that I like fidget, but the thing I often reach to that I think is strange is I have like a heater for my back. It's a really like rad heater. I'm still struggling with like disc problems and stuff like
lower back pain,
yes.
baby.
Lower back. And I find that like sitting for a long time, but if you just throw that heater on, the muscles loosen up. And so I keep this like little back heater next to my desk all the time. And I just, get it on the sore spot, turn it on for an hour, and like it's shocking. You stand up and you're all better. So that's not a toy, but that's kind of, for me, what I reach to. How about you?
I have this amazing thing called a ball of wax.
Whoa.
Which is, so basically it is a kind of a dodecahedron or whatever, like almost like a Dungeons and Dragons dice that you can break apart into these weird rhombuses and then reconfigure into all sorts of other shapes. And it makes a really satisfying clicky noise.
Yeah.
But it's also like really, really good for spurring like just the brain, because you kind of can't help but fit it together into ways that you haven't done it before.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's my strong buy recommendation, to everyone on those balls of wax. And this is, I think, the question that everybody's asking.
Yep.
I've gotten this, hundreds of emails about this.
People want to know this next one.
Everybody needs to know. So if you could go back in time and kill the person who ate and or had sex with a pangolin to start the pandemic, would you do it if nobody knew you did it?
I think we're obligated to say yes. I mean,
you would do it.
Well, think of it. I mean, it's a little bit like those classic AI things where, like, if you keep going straight, you kill the four people.
Trolley problem.
The trolley. Exactly. You turn left, you kill one person. But if you're turning left, you're doing something active to kill somebody, but you saved four people in the process. But you killed somebody purposefully instead of just running over somebody that you were already pointed at. So to me, it feels like that. And like 5 million and counting people are gone, right?
Yeah.
So even though, like, I would say this crisis has inspired quite a bit of human evolution, at least societal evolution, in terms of like our reliance on airplanes, our reliance on cars, like, it's created a lot of change. Not all of it good. People, are underemployed, not wanting to go back to work, all those kinds of things. But it's like, this is the human process. And like looking back 20 years from now, my guess is we'll see as much change coming out of this moment as we did out of World War II in terms of like change to the way society functions. But then again, like, human life is precious. And there's a lot of people whose lives were caught very short, not just like 2 years, but like 40, 50 years. And so, I'd kill that person.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think I would just be like hard yes on that.
Okay, you didn't even have to think about it.
I would also kill. I mean, especially if I get away with it. I mean,
nobody knows. My goodness.
Yeah, like, I mean, if everybody knows, I would have to think about it a little bit more. But if I could just make a small action that has a big effect like that, that is like unquestionably positive. I mean, like, I hate to, interrupt a kinky person in the middle of their enjoyment, right? Like, they call it yucking somebody's yum. I hate to yuck somebody's yum. But, I think, like, if you have sex with a pangolin and it causes a global pandemic, you shouldn't do it. And I think you shouldn't eat the
This is very
or
Avengers Endgame, by the way.
Mm.
This is very Avengers Endgame. And the thing is, though, it's not just the 5 million people that have died. It's like so we've got a lot of like education related work that goes on in this house, from like my wife's startup. She's on the school board. I work at Stanford, right? Like, so we see a lot of the education trends. This has had a profoundly negative effect on kids.
Yeah.
Like, the kid thing is probably almost worse than the death. Or I don't know. I don't know what's worse.
How do you compare them? But yeah, they're both terrible.
Like kids, the separation anxiety, the stress, the post-trauma that these kids are living through right now. It's wild. The child psychologists here in the Valley are like booked up. All of them are booked up because kids need help. So,
yeah, that's terrible. I mean, I remember being a kid during 9/11, and it was, you had one bad day, and the news was like crazy for weeks. Now it's 25,000 people dead, 1 million people dead. It's time for a garden tip. Like that. With that, let's move on to happier stuff. It's the new year. What are you thinking about for your garden?
You know what? I forgot this was coming out after Christmas, but I read a really interesting thing related to Christmas trees, which I wanted to share with you. It's not really a tip. It is a tip, but it's not the kind of tip. The tip count of a Christmas tree is how you define the quality of the Christmas tree.
Oh, interesting.
The higher the tip count, the higher the price of the Christmas tree. It didn't say this, but I think it's almost like thread count on your sheets. The tip
that makes
count.
Sense.
And so if you have more branches on your tree, you have higher quality, and you should pay more for that. So I just, I was thinking, look, maybe that's not for this year's Christmas because this is coming out after, but you look at your tree, you might say like, look, this tree here's got a high tip count, and it can kind of be like a little brag thing you do.
Just the tip. I mean, of course, the second you bring up tip, I have garden news, and I have a tip, which is I know your tomato plants have been blooming, mysteriously for years. My snapdragons, thanks to unseasonably warm weather here in New York City, are blooming again.
My goodness. It's like 60 degrees there or something, right?
Right now it's 40,
okay.
But yeah, it has been like 60, 65 in December, which is a little bit unseasonable.
Yeah.
The tip though is now's the time to think about what you want to grow from seed versus what you want to grow buy at a nursery center or something like that. And the cost of setting up your own home seed starting facility is basically the same as buying the stuff at the garden center if you're going to do that. Yeah, I mean it's like $100 to get like an LED light, especially if you have like a garage or something that you can put it in. They make these great like iron setups where you can like kind of move the lights up as the seedlings grow so that they're getting kind of optimal whatever. And like, some grow lights are like $20-$25 on Amazon, like really, really inexpensive to get. And the seeds or the plants that you grow from seed will always be healthier and better than the ones that you buy from the garden center because they haven't had to deal with the trauma of being shipped all over the place. So like now's the time to like figure out how much space in your house your partner will let you devote to seed starting.
Part of me thinks there's a lot of grow lights that are available secondhand now that marijuana is legal.
Yep.
That's just a hunch.
Actually, I saw a stat. I see a lot of agricultural stats, and but yeah, like I guess the bulk cannabis prices since forget which state legal. I think it was since New York legalized are down like 13%.
Whoa.
And like cannabis growing has just been. I mean, everyone saw this coming who was thinking about it. It's been a gigantic capital fire. I think it's going to be like office furniture.
Yes.
After the first tech boom, you could just get like Aeron chairs for free in Silicon Valley.
Yes. I feel like at one point I took a tomato, squeezed the seeds out, like a purchased tomato, squeezed the seeds out, and planted them in my backyard, and they grew. Is that? Am I misremembering? That actually did happen to me. Okay.
That's a thing that happens all the time. Like especially if you're buying like organic tomatoes from local growers. Like if you're buying stuff that's been, GMO'd or whatever, that won't work.
Yeah.
But you can get
like
your
what
own,
else could I do that? Do you have a sense of like, can I do that with the seeds in my peppers?
Green onions. You can definitely. I mean, you could do it with any seed. Green onions is the easiest thing to do it with because, they just all you have to do is stick them in water, and you can have a farm, going right there. But you could take a piece of garlic, plant it in the ground, potato. The general rule is just like as long as it hasn't been GMO'd all to hell.
You can't quite see my hand there, but I'm showing Sloane a picture of my green onions that are wiffle ball bats. Can't quite tell how big they are in that photo, but they're enormous.
Yeah, they look like, it looks like grass.
It's like super big. Cool. Those are good tips.
Well, yeah. And I think that about does it for us for now.
Wow.
Yeah.
2021.
Good luck to everyone in the new year.
2021 in the bank.
In the bank, baby.
We love you.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Make it rain on 'em.